Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking you on an exploration into a truly vital question for our planet. How can developing economies build a sustainable energy future that's not only green, but, well, also just and economically sound?
Yeah, that's the core challenge, isn't it?
It really is. We're unpacking a groundbreaking study titled Just Transition Towards Defossilized Energy Systems for Developing Economies, a case study of Ethiopia. Now, this isn't just about one country. You could see it as a kind of blueprint for countless nations grappling with similar challenges and opportunities. Our mission for you today is to cut through the complexity, maybe reveal some surprising facts, and offer clear, actionable insights. We'll look at both the technical feasibility and, importantly, the immense societal benefits of this transition. Okay, let's unpack this.
And what's really remarkable about this particular research is its holistic approach. It's the first of its kind, really, to offer such a long-term perspective for an entire national energy system. We're talking looking all the way out to 2050, meticulously connecting climate action, economic growth, and social well-being.
Right.
And the core finding is genuinely disruptive, I'd say. A full transition to a renewable energy system isn't just technically feasible, it actually emerges as the least cost option. And on top of that, it delivers the greatest societal benefits. What's fascinating here is how this study connects all those critical dots in, well, such a practical way.
That's a powerful and, frankly, quite a surprising starting point for many, I think. So let's maybe set the scene a bit for Ethiopia, the focus of this study. It's the second most populated country in Africa, with a rapidly growing economy, yet it still remains one of the poorest globally. The energy poverty statistics really drive this home. Back in 2018, over 50 million Ethiopians lacked electricity.
50 million, that's huge.
It is, and a staggering 98.9 million relied on unsustainable biomass, think wood, charcoal for cooking. Now, while the country possesses vast untapped renewable resources, hydropower, solar, wind, geothermal, it's also incredibly vulnerable to climate change. And currently, that unsustainable biomass still makes up, 87% of its primary energy supply?
An enormous percentage.
Exactly. To its credit, Ethiopia has been proactive. They set an ambitious goal with their 2011 Climate Resilient Green Economy, or CRGE strategy, the aim, middle income status by 2025 with no net greenhouse gas emissions. So how does a country trying to lift its people out of poverty navigate this huge challenge of tackling climate change at the same time?
Well, that's the core dilemma for so many developing nations, isn't it? Especially across sub-Saharan Africa. They're often characterized by limited infrastructure, rapidly growing populations, and that historical reliance on either fossil fuels or, like you said, unsustainable biomass. Globally, the push for these transitions is clear. You've got agreements like the Paris Agreement, Sustainable Development Goal 7, calling for universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy.
Right.
And while Ethiopia's government does have plans to invest in solar, wind, and hydropower, this study highlights a critical point. A heavy reliance on hydropower, for example, it comes with inherent risks. It's highly vulnerable to climate change, think erratic rainfall, and these large-scale projects can bring significant financial risks, cost overruns, schedule delays.
Which can be crippling.
Absolutely. It can even lead to increased public debt and, as some other research points out, sometimes even opens doors to corruption. So this raises a really important question. How can a developing economy like Ethiopia actually achieve these ambitious goals effectively and equitably, making sure everyone benefits?
And that's precisely what this study aimed to figure out. It used a remarkably sophisticated approach, a techno-economic analysis built on something called the LUT Energy System Transition Model.
That's a model from the Lappeenranta University of Technology in Finland.
Right. And this model didn't just look at the technical side. It meticulously examined broader socioeconomic aspects: greenhouse gas reduction, better energy services, and, crucially, job creation. The researchers simulated the energy transition in 5-year steps, from 2015 all the way to 2050. They developed 6 different scenarios, but the focus was really comparing what they called best policy scenarios, or BPS, with current policy scenarios, CPS.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This wasn't just some back-of-the-envelope calculation. It was a detailed hourly resolution model covering Ethiopia's entire energy system: power, heat, transport, even desalination.
Precisely. The LUT model is a linear optimization tool. Its goal is basically to minimize the total annual system cost. And it considers everything from installed capacities, operational costs, even how quickly generation can ramp up or down. It's a very robust framework.
So it's quite complex modeling.
Very. And the model had specific constraints built in, too. For instance, no new nuclear, coal, or oil-based power plants allowed after 2015. gas turbines were okay, but only if they could run on synthetic gas later on. Also, to keep the transition manageable, the share of new renewable capacity couldn't jump by more than, say, 4% per year.
Makes sense. Keeps it realistic.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember, while the analysis focuses on Ethiopia, its findings are highly applicable elsewhere. The country serves as a really good example for many other developing nations facing similar conditions. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, this study really fills a critical research gap in sub-Saharan Africa. It provides solid, data-driven insights for policymakers.
Okay, so with that incredibly thorough methodology behind it, let's dive into the core findings. What picture emerges for Ethiopia's energy future under these different policy choices? You mentioned the contrast is stark. The best policy scenarios, they cost less than the current policy ones and generate significantly more jobs?
Absolutely. That's the headline, really. Let's break down those key findings, starting with the energy mix transformation. Under the best policy scenarios, or BPS, Ethiopia's total installed capacity just explodes from just over 2 gigawatts in 2015 to a huge 144 gigawatts by 2050.
Wow, that's massive growth.
It's transformative, and solar PV becomes the main player, providing 50 to 66% of electricity generation. This is complemented by about 9–14% wind energy and 10–27% hydropower. Now, compare that to the current policy scenario, the CPS,
Right.
where hydropower keeps a much bigger share, and fossil fuels are still part of the mix. This diversified mix in the BPS is so important because it dramatically reduces Ethiopia's vulnerability to those climate change risks affecting hydropower, like unpredictable rainfall. It makes the whole system more resilient.
That makes sense. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, essentially.
Precisely. And, maybe surprisingly for some, this huge renewable infrastructure needs minimal land. We're talking just 0.1% of land for ground-mounted solar PV, another 0.1% for wind, which means it can easily be co-located with agriculture or existing hydro sites.
Interesting. So it doesn't necessarily mean sacrificing huge swaths of land?
Not at all. Now, from an economic standpoint, that least costing aspect is incredibly compelling. The total annual costs for the BPS are projected around 14 billion euros by 2050. Compare that to roughly 19 billion euros in the CPS.
So that's a 5 billion euro saving every year by 2050.
Exactly. That's not marginal. It's a staggering difference. Imagine what a developing nation like Ethiopia could do with those freed up funds.
Healthcare, education.
Right, social infrastructure. It fundamentally challenges that old idea that going green is an unaffordable luxury for developing economies. This cost advantage also shows up in the levelized cost of energy, the LCOE. That's basically the lifetime cost per unit of energy produced.
Okay.
The LCOE drops from 51 euros per megawatt hour in 2015 down to around 36 in the BPS by 2050. But in the CPS, it only decreases to 47.
A significant difference.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it's driven mainly by the falling costs of renewables, especially solar PV, plus big savings on fuel and greenhouse gas emission costs, which you don't have in the BPS.
Okay, so it's cheaper. What about the environmental impact?
Environmentally, the findings are, well, equally dramatic and encouraging. The best policy scenarios achieve zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050.
Zero. Across all sectors.
Across all sectors modeled power, heat, and transport. That's down from about 16 megatons of CO2 equivalent back in 2015. Now, contrast that sharply with the current policy scenario, where emissions actually increase to around 22 megatons by 2050.
Wow. So one path leads to zero emissions, the other leads to more emissions than today.
Precisely. And in the CPS, that increase is mostly driven by continued fossil fuel use in transport. And then, perhaps most profoundly, this study highlights immense social benefits, particularly in job creation and energy justice. The transition promises over 950,000 direct energy jobs by 2050 in the BPS. That's a huge leap compared to just over 430,000 in the CPS.
Almost double the jobs. Where are these jobs coming from?
They're spread across manufacturing, construction, and installation. That's the bulk of them, but also operation and maintenance, transmission, and eventually decommissioning. Now, this does mean there's a challenge, reskilling and training workers from traditional energy sectors.
Sure, that's always part of a just transition.
Absolutely. But the overall impact is profoundly positive. Moreover, this study really emphasizes energy justice. Solar PV's modularity makes it perfect for off-grid electrification. It offers a viable, scalable way to reach the 59 million Ethiopians currently without electricity access, and the over 90 million who still rely on polluting fuels for cooking. This is especially impactful in remote rural areas where connecting to the grid is just too expensive or difficult.
So it directly addresses energy poverty.
It does. It shows how knowledge, when you understand it and apply it, can literally transform lives, create opportunities, and build genuine equity.
That's fascinating. A zero-emission future that's projected to be cheaper and create more jobs. But, for many listeners, that combination might sound almost too good to be true. A common concern is always stability, right? Can a system dominated by variable renewables like solar and wind really be stable? What did the study find about managing that variability, ensuring supply security?
That's a critical question, yeah. And the study delivers a clear and, I think, reassuring answer.
Mm.
There are no technical showstoppers to making this transition work. It outlines a whole portfolio of flexibility options. First, energy storage plays a huge role.
Batteries, essentially.
Batteries, yes, both utility scale and smaller ones for consumers for electricity, but also thermal energy storage for heat. All of these increase significantly towards 2050. They're essential for smoothing out the ups and downs of solar and wind. Second, a highly interconnected national grid is crucial.
How does that help?
Well, it lets you balance resources across the country. If it's cloudy and solar output is low in one region, wind might be strong somewhere else. A good grid lets you share that power. It makes integrating renewables much easier. Interestingly, the BPS, which is more decentralized with lots of solar and wind, actually shows lower grid utilization than the CPS.
Really? Why is that?
Because the CPS relies so heavily on specific large hydro sites, needing maximum grid capacity to move that power, the BPS is more distributed.
I see. Okay, storage and grid. What else?
Thirdly, and this is perhaps the most innovative part, is sector coupling, sometimes called power to X. This is basically where electricity becomes the primary energy source for almost everything. It creates this dynamic web of interconnected systems that boosts efficiency and stability.
Give us some examples.
Okay, so you have power to heat. The heat sector, which is about a third of final energy demand by 2050 in the model, gets electrified using things like electric heating and heat pumps. Then there's power to mobility. It means direct electrification for transport. Think battery electric vehicles, electric trains,
Right.
but also indirect electrification. Using renewable electricity to create synthetic fuels, like hydrogen or advanced Fischer-Tropsch fuels, basically liquid fuels made from syngas.
Yeah.
These can power sectors like aviation or heavy industry that are really hard to electrify directly.
Okay, so using electricity to make fuel for planes, for example.
Exactly. And that links to the final piece, power to fuel. Producing these synthetic fuels, hydrogen, methane, diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, using clean electricity to meet any remaining demand. And this actually creates entirely new industrial opportunities as well.
So it's a much more integrated system.
Very integrated. And this strong sector coupling achieves incredibly high efficiency and keeps costs down. It makes electricity the go-to energy carrier. It ensures that even with very high shares of variable renewables, the system remains stable. The study even found a level of curtailment that's unused excess generation.
Wasted energy, basically.
Right. In the BPS, it was only about 2%. That's one of the lowest levels ever reported for a 100% renewable system dominated by variable sources. So it really highlights how modern energy systems use every tool in the toolbox, storage, grids, sector coupling, to achieve stability and efficiency.
This study painted such a clear picture of the differences between the best policy scenarios and the current policy scenarios. You've hit the key points. It's least costing, least greenhouse gas emitting, and most job rich. So wrapping this up a bit, what are the big actionable takeaways for policymakers, not just in Ethiopia, but in other developing economies facing similar transitions?
Well, it's clear the findings challenge some conventional thinking. For example, the study implicitly suggests maybe rethinking a heavy reliance on hydropower. While it's renewable, the research points out its vulnerabilities, climate change impacts on rainfall, the risk of projects becoming stranded assets if things change.
Meaning they become uneconomical.
Right. If climate patterns shift drastically or cheaper, more flexible options emerge like solar. Plus, there are the significant social and environmental impacts often associated with large dams. Instead, the study really positions solar PV as a much more resilient, modular, scalable, and ultimately lower-risk option for countries like Ethiopia.
So embrace solar.
That seems to be a key message. And based on these insights, the study offers several critical policy recommendations. First, and this is maybe obvious but essential, strong political will is absolutely crucial. Without that leadership, the best data just sits there.
True.
This needs to be coupled with well-designed policy frameworks, not just reactive policies, but proactive ones, setting clear long-term renewable energy targets, combined with comprehensive energy market reforms.
So clear goals and rules.
Exactly. Second, investments in scalable and modular RE technologies, especially things like off-grid solar PV, are vital for rapid electrification, particularly in those remote, underserved areas. That directly tackles energy poverty.
Makes sense.
Third, energy policy has to prioritize resource diversification. Don't rely too heavily on just one source, whether it's hydro or something else. Diversification builds resilience. And finally, a strong focus on social inclusiveness and energy justice is vital. You have to ensure energy services are available, accessible, and affordable for everyone, especially rural households who currently bear the brunt of energy poverty and rely on that polluting biomass for cooking, which is another area needing urgent policy attention. For health reasons as much as climate, knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied. This study provides a really comprehensive roadmap for Ethiopia to potentially go from being energy poor to energy rich, improving livelihood sustainably.
That's a powerful summary, and it truly underscores the transformative potential of the study. Just transition towards defossilized energy systems for developing economies. A case study of Ethiopia really highlights it seems clear that the future isn't just about greener energy, but about smarter, more equitable systems that truly benefit everyone.
And that leads us, maybe, to a final, thought-provoking idea for you, the listener, to consider. This study strongly suggests the biggest challenge isn't technical anymore. It's really about the vision and the policy choices we make. So the question is, what fundamental assumptions about energy policy might you rethink in light of these findings? And how could those changes lead to a more sustainable and just future, not just for Ethiopia, but for other developing regions around the world?
A great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the knowledge that shapes our world.